Alright, so this is the third ever race recap video I suppose I've done, and this week we're going to cover off on the Noosa triathlon, which is the first ever Olympic distance race that I've actually done. Before that though, I still got in a pretty solid week of training in the lead up to this race, didn't do any kind of taper or anything like that. So I'll run through the full week of training and then we'll actually talk about the race. Now Monday started out just as usual with a 1 hour easy ride. So done on the trainer and kept truly easy, like average 130 watts, so nothing hard at all there. Around lunchtime, I just got in a 3K swim. That one was done as 10 100s, 4 200s, 5 100s, 2 200s. So a fairly short swim just to squeeze in on my lunch break at work, but still hit some fairly good paces for that one, feeling pretty good. So that takes us to Tuesday morning now, and pretty much the entire training log series, I'd always done a strength session on Tuesday morning. So I go to the gym and lift some basic weights. But I'm sort of replacing that now with an extra swim session. Number one, I don't feel like the gym session was extremely productive, and I think I could use that time better if I was to add in an extra smaller swim, just to increase the frequency of the swims in attempt to improve my feel for the water. So being in the water, consecutive days, I think is the better way for me to improve my technique, because the improvements that I make on one session, I'm not going to forget them if I take a day off and then get back in the pool the day after and I kind of am back to square one. So just adding in a really short 2K swim here, making that 10 by 200, just all moderate, all easy, not going for any fitness improvements here, just going to actually try and improve, my technique and feel for the water just by adding in an extra session. So I got that one done, average about 140 per 100, nice and easy. And then lunchtime, pretty typical session I do on the Tuesday around lunch is just that upper aerobic session on the bike. And I actually think this is probably one of the better sessions that I'm doing on the bike at the moment in terms of what's actually going to help me on the bike leg of the Ironman. So 3 by 15 at Ironman power, roughly. So aiming for about 215 watts, taking a few minutes recovery between each. And that just takes us to about an hour of cycling total. And I should mention too, I am doing those efforts strictly in that TT position. I think that's one of the reasons why it is such a productive workout for me. I'm really honing in on that Ironman feel in that Ironman position and trying to really improve that upper aerobic threshold. Tuesday finishes out just with the track session, so 8 800s, and I'll put the splits up on the screen, but I was pretty happy with those, kept them around 2 minutes 40 for the 800s. So that's pretty good, a bit under 6 minutes per mile, a little under, I think that's around, I'd guess 330 to 345 per kilometer, but I'll put the actual conversions up. And that's a pretty solid session. Especially when I've got a race on the Sunday, I was pretty happy to get some good speed work in. Wednesday morning starts out with that strength endurance ride that I've been doing a bit lately. Now this one was planned as 4 by 15 minutes at 250 watts. I did the first 2 at 250 and was really struggling, so I knocked the last 2 back to 230 watts just to get through the session. It's interesting, I actually find that when I put in a hard bike session in the morning, I perform significantly worse than if I do it of an afternoon. So just an interesting thing to note there. This session was done in the morning and I struggled with it, but a pretty similar session the week before I was fine with, but I did it in the afternoon. So just an interesting observation there that, I tend to struggle a lot more with morning sessions versus afternoon sessions. Maybe it's just time for recovery, better nutrition, I don't know what it is, but either way, still got through the session. It's not a great session because I had to knock the power back, but it's not too bad either. We still kind of got what we were looking for. Wednesday afternoon, 4.2 kilometer swim. So the main set for that one, I'll just read it here, 4 rounds, and you just do a 200, 50, 250, repeat that 4 times, and then the rest is just, warm up and cool down. So some pretty good splits there, nothing crazy though. Wednesday afternoon, travelled up to Port Macquarie, and that meant that Thursday morning, I was able to do my 90-minute moderate to easy ride out on the actual Ironman course. So 90 minutes, 43 kilometers, just averaging 180 watts. So pretty perfect, just getting some more experience out there on the actual race course. So the next workout, it wasn't planned as a brick, but just because I was going to be traveling up to the Sunshine Coast that afternoon, I had to squeeze that session in right after the bike session. So that became a 12-kilometer run off the bike, and it still had some efforts in it. So it was essentially 10 rounds of 3 minutes hard, 2 minutes easy, and it was pretty hot, so the splits weren't too impressive for that. Like the hards, I was running like 430 per kilometer. But considering the heat and the fact that it was essentially a brick session, I'm still pretty happy with that one. That afternoon though, traveled up to the Sunshine Coast. And Friday morning, we were just in the pool for a 6.2 kilometer swim. So another good endurance session. We were just doing essentially the main set, 2 rounds of a 1500, 400 paddles, and then 6 by 100. So you get that good long endurance at the start. The paddle session, so that's really, you know, it kills my upper body, really. My shoulders are dead after doing paddles. And then 6 100, so you get a bit of speed work in the end there. So really honing in on that muscle endurance, which is something I think I really need to work on at the moment. Friday afternoon, super easy session. That was just testing out the race kit. So I just threw on the, you know, aero helmet, race wheels, tri-suit, and just went for a pretty cruisy ride around the block. Nothing really interesting there, just 37 minutes of easy riding. But Saturday morning, I still wanted to get that long ride in. I've said it in last week's video, one thing I'm really trying to work on at the moment is the consistency of that long ride. So I did not want to take the long ride out just because there was a race done on the weekend. And obviously I haven't done any kind of taper for it. But I did the Saturday long ride, 110 kilometers, 3 hours, 51 minutes, just rode from the Sunshine Coast to Noosa and back. Perfect road to ride on. So you get a full bike lane the whole way from Sunny Coast to Noosa and back. And it's dead smooth and dead flat the whole way there. So great ride, pretty easy though, just averaged 184 watts. So nothing too impressive in terms of, you know, power or time, anything like that. But still pretty good considering we had a race the next day. And that was the last session I did for the week leading up to it. So now we can actually talk about the race. And overall, I mean, I had zero expectations. I was going in as a charity entry, racing it for a charity team. So I was technically a non-competitive anyway, but you know, I still wanted to race as well as I could race. But I didn't go in with any stress. Like the day before, I was walking around shopping, eating meat pies, doing a long ride. Like there was no specific race preparation for it. It was kind of just treating it like a good hard workout on the Sunday. So race morning, I didn't do anything special. I mean, I just got up, had a pretty typical breakfast, a nice big bowl of cereal, coffee, and drove down to the race course. So got into transition, set it all up, left transition, had about an hour to kill. So, you know, had a nice bacon and egg roll, coffee, just really chilled out like I was about to start a pretty moderate workout. And yeah, just jumped in the water. So it was a non-wetsuit race. And I was kind of interested to see how I would be able to swim in a non-wetsuit race. And it was an open water with probably the most swell. I mean, Port Macquarie and Sunshine Coast, the 2 races I've had, were dead flat. Noosa was very flat as well, but still had a bit more of some, you know, a few more waves than the last 2 races. So that was going to be a good experience to get. Ran out into the water, felt pretty good the entire swim. One thing I think mentally, the way I approached it is I didn't want to be afraid of the distance. I think in the last 2 races I've done, I would go into the swim very conservative and cautious to not blow up towards the end. But this time, I mean, I had nothing to lose, so I wanted to go out fairly strong and try and maintain a strong pace the whole way through. I didn't really mind if I burned any matches or anything in the swim. You know, it's a fun race, I might as well get some good experience out of it. And so I swam pretty well. Total time in the water, 23 minutes, 43 seconds, which I think is about 135 per 100 pace. And I was pretty stoked to get a swim split like that in, considering I think Ironman, I swim like a 148 per 100 pace. And that kind of, like, I felt like I could hold that for a lot longer. I didn't get out of the water totally gassed or anything like that. So that's a good sign, especially because there was a bit of chop in the water and it was a non-wetsuit swim. So, I mean, Ironman, I swim 148 per 100 in a wetsuit, and this is 135 per 100 in a non-wetsuit swim. So, swim is definitely still improving, and that's exactly what I want to see. It's interesting though, I say I didn't get out exhausted and I didn't feel tired, but I did cramp on the bike, just like I did at Ironman Australia this year. And I remember after that race and in the race recap, I sat down and said, oh, what an idiot am I didn't have any carbs before the race, no electrolytes, and then I get out and cramp. What did I think was gonna happen? Well, interestingly, this race, I had plenty of carbs, plenty of electrolytes, plenty of water, you know, gels, Gatorade, bacon and egg roll. Like, I ate heaps of food and fueled really well before the swim, but got out and still cramped, and I wasn't in the wetsuit either. So it's not the fuel and it's not the wetsuit that's causing me to cramp. And I think what it is essentially when I swim in the open water, I don't kick very well. I sort of just drag my legs along, a slight kick, and I keep them really tense the entire time. So I kind of flex all the muscles in my legs and just sort of drag them along behind. And I think what happens is I hold that for an extended period of time, and then as soon as my legs start moving and actually take the weight of my body, all of a sudden that's a shock because they've just been tensed for the last 23 minutes, or in an Ironman the last hour. They've sort of just been tensed and dragging along behind, not really flowing much blood through. Sunshine Coast, I didn't cramp, but remember I actually made a real mental note to continuously do big extended kicks every so often and bring my knees all the way into my chest and back out. And that's when I didn't cramp. So I don't think it was a fueling error at Ironman Australia that caused me to cramp. I think it's actually my technique in the open water. So one thing I should be working on, I think, is improving my kick, or at least making myself more conscious to pump more blood through my legs, particularly towards the end of the swim. But I think I could actually improve my times as well if I was to focus on the kick in the water. So maybe that's something I can incorporate more into my weekly swims, just with like a kickboard. But also I think there's going to be a lot of benefit in me going out and doing some actual open water swims and trying to, improve my overall efficiency in the water. There's got to be something going on there in terms of technique that I can improve to stop myself from cramping. So the first sort of 5 to 10 minutes of the bike wasn't very comfortable because I felt like if I was going to push too hard, I was going to cramp. So I was pretty cautious, I suppose, when I started the bike leg. But I'll quickly talk about transition. I was pretty happy with my transition, actually. I mean, I had my bike shoes already on the bike, so all I had to do was whip the helmet on and run it out. I mean, when I was in the charity section, obviously it's quite packed. There's a lot of people around. So transition was slow just because you essentially had to jump in line and run out with everyone. But the time for transition, I think it was about 2.5 minutes. It was 2 minutes, 46 seconds. So that's down from 8 minutes in my Ironman Australia transition time. So that's a lot better. I mean, granted, I didn't have to take off a wetsuit, which probably takes a bit of time, but look, I think I can take 5 minutes off my Ironman time just with that improved transition, so that's pretty good. All right, so looking at the bike now, and I mean, the roads at Noosa are great for riding on, super smooth. I mean, there's one hill that takes, it's about a 2K climb at, I don't know, I would guess like a 3 to 4% grade. It's nothing crazy, but it does take a while to get up, but then you go super fast back down. I mean, I'll have a look at the overall splits here. I felt pretty good. Average power, 228 watts. Average speed, 37 kilometers an hour. Weighted average power, 235 watts. So that's nothing crazy, but I mean, I still got fairly decent speed. Like, it's interesting, I was sort of saying in the last videos, oh, I need to be holding 250 watts if I want to go 37 kilometers an hour at Port Macquarie, but I mean, granted, 230 watts gets me to 37 kilometers. I am down to about 70 kilos body weight at the moment, so that probably helps. And I was trying to say super aero, so not a huge power, but still fairly decent speed without much power. So I'm not too disappointed in that, but again, I think the bike is my main focus at the moment. I really want to improve that leg. But overall, that's not too bad. Bike split was 1 hour and 3 minutes for the 40 kilometers. And I got off the bike feeling relatively fresh. Like, I knew I could go and run a fairly decent 10K off the bike. So the next transition, 2 minutes, 38 seconds, and I did stuff this transition up pretty bad. I mean, I dismounted the bike fairly well, ran it into transition, threw my shoes on, which took a bit longer than I was hoping. But then I went to run out of transition and I ran the wrong way. So I kind of did 2 laps of transition before I actually got out. So that probably gave me an extra 30 to 45 seconds, so that's kind of annoying. But once I was out on the course, I felt like I could run about 40 minutes for the 10K, and that's kind of what I was hoping to do in the lead up to the race. And that's essentially exactly what I did. I think it was about 38 minutes, 39 minutes, 29 seconds. So that's not too bad, fairly happy with that kind of split. So overall, that gave me a full time of 2 hours, 11 minutes and 58 seconds. So I'm pretty happy with that time. Realistically, I didn't do any taper in the lead up, and I didn't, do any kind of training specific towards an Olympic distance triathlon. I mean, my training is very much at the moment dedicated towards Ironman distance. But I do have to admit, I really enjoyed this Olympic distance race. I've never done one of this distance before, but it is a lot of fun, and I'm very tempted to go back again next year. I mean, I am at the moment thinking about the kind of races I can do next year, and I don't know if I'd be able to fit this one in, but it is a lot of fun. Unlike my Sunshine Coast race recap, look, I've got nothing negative to say about this race. It was well run, it's great fun, great atmosphere, great experience, so highly recommend this one. So I mean, looking at that time there, I know there's a few things I could do to, lower that to lower the splits on all three, especially the transitions. And I would be lying if I said I wasn't tempted to focus a bit on Olympic distance now, but look, I don't think it would be wise for me to try and, set any goals around setting a faster Olympic time. At the moment, I do just want to focus on that Ironman distance. But in the future, Olympic distance racing is actually a lot more fun than I expected it to be. And to be fair, okay, the training for an Olympic distance race and Ironman distance is probably not a huge difference. Really, you just do like a longer ride and a longer run for Ironman. A few longer, moderate efforts, I suppose, when you're trying to get in Ironman shape. But the training's mostly the same, and it does correlate fairly closely. And that's why I think I was still able to run, a sub 40 without really training to go sub 40, and the swim's just naturally improving for me, and the bike, that's the thing I'm trying to focus on at the moment. So overall, I'm fairly happy with those times. For the next 12 months at least, it's going to be 100% Ironman focused, but a 2:11:58 is definitely a time that I want to go well below sometime in the future. But yeah, that's basically it for the week. I mean, realistically, I'm still considering this just a training week, though there was a race in there as well. Like, you know, it wasn't one that I'd really trained specifically for. So having a look at the weekly totals, we still swam about 17 kilometers. We rode about 333 kilometers, and then just the run was down to 37 kilometers. So overall, 18 hours, 22 minutes with the race in there. So that's pretty good training. And then next week, we're ramping the volume right back up. It's gonna be a pretty big week next week, especially the weekend. So that's gonna be good fun to do, and hopefully I can get a good video out of it. But we are now only a few weeks away from doing an indoor Ironman. So pool swim, trainer ride, treadmill run. That's gonna be good fun, try and peak for that. And then I think at the moment I'm just gonna do more, you know, I did the Christian Blumenfeld workout a few weeks ago, and then I'm doing another one similar to that next week, and then we've got the indoor Ironman. And I just wanna do a few more fun, big training days. Kind of treat them as like, almost going into it like a race, just to get some experience pushing, you know, a hard session. Because I think what I benefit, like, I think when I do races, I come off the back of them learning more and improve. Like, I feel like physically and mentally I improve after I've done all 3 races now. So if I can do more sessions where it's not exactly a race, but I kind of treat it like a race, I think that's something that's going to be really beneficial for me before we go into, you know, a real, you know, that 12 to 16 week block in the lead up to Ironman, where everything's just going to be really strictly focused on that. At the moment, I can still have some fun and do things like an indoor Ironman or Noosa triathlon and, you know, Christian Blumenfeld's Ironman workout. Just some fun things like that to keep me mentally stimulated before we lock back into some really strict discipline training towards that Ironman. So that's what we're working on at the moment. Another good solid week of training, and yeah, hopefully we can back it up again next week.